Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And today I'm going to be running you through the very simple and basic method that I use sometimes for colouring in light anime and manga hair. Now, I thought we could go ahead and work with a very simple haircut for our character today, whilst I'm taking you through a very simple method for getting things coloured and shaded in. And I think in future down the line, we're going to do a number of different hair tutorials, and each time round I can pick a different hair colour to work with, and we're also going to talk about a few different methods and styles for colouring them in. So it's going to be the basic quick version for today, but maybe further along we're going to look at very saturated versions, golden coloured hair, different colour combinations you use with extreme characters, what are you doing with purples and reds, all sorts of things. But also, we'll be doing all sorts of different haircut styles as well, so that we can really explore all the different options, especially when it comes to mixing up your colour palette combinations. So remember, I do have some separate tutorials already on the channel for actually drawing your character's hair, as well as actually building up your characters from basic shapes and so on. And of course, on the digital side of things here, we've already done some tutorials on building up your characters in Photoshop, working with different layers, and getting your skin tones and bits all coloured in. So hopefully you've got the basics under your wing, because right now I've got all of that part of the process under time lapse, just so that this tutorial today will at least be relatively quick. Now, of course, I am just using my very simple brush pack because I have a very simple mind, but if you want to grab it, you can download it for free. The link should be in the description below. And I always really recommend that you build up your own characters, get something going and use that to follow along. But if you want to actually grab the line art to this piece today, I will be adding it to my tutorials template work pack on Patreon. Okay guys, so basically what we've got ourselves is one of my Elf OC characters over here. This one is Victoria on a top, for those of you who are keeping track. And as you can see, we've already gone through all sorts of layers and bits to completely flesh out this character, with the exception of doing the hair. Now, what I'm going to do firstly is actually go to the bottom layer down here, add a new layer, make sure that I'm on a fairly neutral grey in the background, and just paint bucket tool to fill that in, just so that objectively we're going to be working with a fairly flat tone against which we can judge how blonde and how bright or dark we're making the hair layer. Now, if I scroll up on here, I've got my line art layers and bits right at the top here. I'll turn them back on. But I've also got up here the layers which have the eyebrows and eyelashes. And I'm going to make a new layer below all of those, but above everything else. Now again, hopefully this all sounds fairly normal to you. If this is a bit new, do bear in mind we've talked about layers and building up your characters in detail in some other tutorials. So maybe have a quick gander at those if this sounds a little bit like new territory. But with this hair layer here, I'm doing that to make sure that the eyebrows are always going to poke through our hair colouring, because it's going to help sell the expression of our character instead of hiding it. Now, with a blonde haired character like this, what I like to do is make sure that I'm working only in the middle section to start off with for our base tone. And I'm going to just nudge this further up to yellow than it is orange. And in this middle section here, I'm going to keep it right at the top so it's relatively light, but not too far over to the right where things get really deep and saturated, not for the base. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got my hard round brush here. I'm going to make it relatively large so that we can colour in a relatively large area. That will do quite nicely for a start. And I don't mind going over the edges on the outside because I'm going to use the wand tool to delete a lot of that in just a moment. But I do want to make sure that on the inside edges or where it's touching any of the skin, but we've got a relatively good join with the line. So I'm just going to take a little bit of care around some of these areas and really get moving with the others. Whilst I'm doing this, it probably doesn't hurt to just quickly say that right now this video is coming out in March of 2019, and this month I have yet another drawing tablet giveaway going on. So if you want to have a shot at winning an Artist XP Pen 12 graphics drawing tablet, then all you've got to do is make sure that you're subscribed to Megamega 2, my gaming channel, and Filmcram, my film channel. There'll be some details in the description below, but I didn't want to put a great big advert about it at the front of this tutorial, simply because this particular competition is going to go out of date at the end of the month, and I have no idea when you at home happen to actually be watching this. So let's get these bits down here with these points. Just taking care to make sure that I've covered up against that line edge as much as possible. Let's just take that back a bit and try that again. And then same down here. And on the paper and pencil side of my tutorials, I do certainly have some guides for framing the face, working out what you're doing for fringe for your characters, as well as tutorial for longer hair as well. And we'll be, as I've said, playing up with different hairstyles when we do some red hair tutorials, silver hair tutorials. Oh, we can use my other OC, in fact, Danny, for that one. So that'll work out absolutely great. And of course, if you are following along at home, I mean, ideally, I hope you're doing it with one of your own characters that you've made up, which is absolutely fantastic if so. But if not, and you just want to have a go at some practice, I do have the line-only copy of this particular illustration. I'm going to stick that into the tutorials work pack as mentioned on Patreon as well for the curious. So let's just do the same and make sure that we've caught the braids that she has just down here. There's one sneaking over on this side, just like so. And the reason that I'm using the hard edge brush for this one is because I don't want any soft meeting areas that are just going to cause some problems a bit later in the process. When it comes to the layer, which is just that sort of initial foundation, that template, you want everything to be nice and crisp, and then you can work out all your soft colors and your gradients and tones on top using clipping masks, which is what I'm going to run you through in just a quick second. So let's go up here, just like so. Fantastic. And then what I'm going to be doing is just deleting these excess edges. Now I'm going to go down to the main base layer for this entire character, which I've got down here. And that is because it really just selects the entirety of the model, except for the negative space on the outside. So using the wand tool, I'm just going to click here, hold down the shift button so that I can add in another click in there. And then still holding shift, just grab this little area in here. So I've selected all of that outside zone. Oh, there's a bit there as well. I'm going to go back up to my hair layer here and just tap delete, and then everything is tidied up. It's not a perfect edge, but this is just a basics tutorial, so let's not stress about it. And then I'm going to go onto a layer above, and I'm going to right click that and select create clipping mask. And we've talked about this before, but basically if I just grab a random color now, it means that any marks that I make won't show unless they're on top of that hair area. Let's Control Z a couple times to get rid of those. And what I really intend to do with this, in fact, I'll get rid of that because I've just put some mystery blue somewhere. So again, make sure that clipping mask layer is all set there. Is we're going to, with a very soft brush, which is right up here, we're going to make that nice and large. And I'm just going to sweep in a little bit of a darker area and then a little bit of a lighter tone as well, just so that we're going to be just giving the very first hints of gradient and shadow to this hair. And that will always sit in the background and just really help give it pop. So I'm going to go back on my color slider towards these yellows, but I'm going to take things ever so slightly down towards the orange, just a touch, and keep things relatively desaturated. I'm still not going anywhere over to the right. And I'm going to just use round about here, but it's kind of pulling that hair color slightly towards a yellowish brown more than anything. And then I'm going to just very lightly start to sweep that across. I will make sure the opacity is set to about 30%. And then let's make that even a little bit larger. Oh, that's far too large. And just give that a few strokes. I'm focusing on the tips of the hair firstly at the front. So I'm just going back and forth as I tap my way. Just down here. And then I'm doing a similar thing just right up at the top of the head here, just where everything's kind of meeting in from the top and pulling out towards that fringe. And then a little bit round the back down this side. And I'm just really thinking about a rough light source, which is vaguely above this character. A little bit on the inside edge of a braid here, which probably caught in shadow. The inside edge down this braid here, a very similar thing. And right down there as well. And then what I'm going to do is a very similar process for some lighter areas. I'm going to get that slider, just touch it up towards the yellow a bit further. And this time, inside of this selection area box, I'm going to take it slightly over to the left, just so that it gets a little bit lighter and whiter in tone. and then do a very similar thing with a few soft strokes. Just back and forth in a relatively straight arc. I'm moving my hand right across from side to side. I'm not trying to get really particular and specific anywhere. This is all just vague for the moment. A little bit around the back there. Back and forth once more, and then let's just grab just the outside edge. But braid there, a little bit there, and just as it comes down here, just a touch. And there we've got our very basic tone on there. If I was doing the simplest possible character, I'd be relatively happy with that, to be fair. But what we're going to do now is go into a darker tone again, and we're going to start to really highlight the shape of the different hairs which are going on here. So for that, I'm going to pop onto a new layer again, right click and make sure that's clipped as well. And then I'm going to go to my half and half brush over here, make it a nice chunk larger, however. Something like that will probably do the trick. Let's go a tiny bit larger. And I'm going to actually go from the yellows now down into the oranges. I'm still keeping things not overly colourful. And really I'm into this kind of slightly more orangey part of the slider, just for the sake of finding a good orangey brown. But I can now go ever so slightly more to the right to pluck something that's just a touch more saturated, so that it will compare and stick out quite nicely from this tone of hair. So what I'm going to be doing here is always thinking about the shape and following the curve of these hairs, and I'm going to basically just start to pluck out these triangular arcs from the bottom and take that colour right up along the outside edge. So up like here, lots of smooth gestures, lots of sweeping strokes is what I'm doing with my hand, and then just take that up the inside edge here. And it's really as if I'm creating this big thick inside border for the bottom of these triangular sections of hair, and just working my way up along here and over this edge. And I've still got that saturation nice and low, so that I'm kind of carefully building up where I do things, so that I have a lot of different strokes which build up that form instead of one really big thick heavy stroke. This is just how I personally like to work, by the way. This just gives me a little bit of backing out opportunity if I go a little bit far into something, and by gradually building up these tones and colours, I get to sort of see how far into any one direction I want to go before I sort of call it a day. So again, just sweeping up around these curves just like so, down there and up here. And what I'm going to do is that for the rest of the hair around here, I'll give that a cheeky bit of time lapse, but before I do and finish off the rest of this area, every now and then I'm actually going to pop up here and just start to separate this out as well. So I'm just going to very gradually build up an extra line here, always making sure that I'm following that flow and that sweep. And just with that, I've ever so slightly broken up this hair section here. And then I'll just do maybe another one just here. Just starting to break them up there. And in a very similar way, I'm going to go around this outside edge. I'm going to pull these different sort of sections out using this method right around this edge and do the bits here. So this bit won't take a really quick second in time lapse. Okay, so welcome back. Really all I've done is just copy this process all the way around the edges. I'm essentially using this like it might be a bit of a shadow brush as we go down here on the braids, just to pick a few areas. But the key is less is more. I haven't gone too nuts when it comes to breaking up these different triangles of hair, just giving it a few kind of extra strands here, here and here, just so that we really kind of give off this quality of what's going on with the hair itself. Now, what also then helps is to give this a bit of extra pop by highlighting the inside edge. So what I'm talking about here is I'm actually going to go over to the soft tool over here, the soft brush. I'm leaving that relatively nice and small compared to the overall image. And I'm going to use the color picker just to grab this lightest part of hair tone that we've got here. Go back to that brush. And I'm going to just do, because again, I'm still on this very low opacity, just a few strokes down on these edges just inside here to really up the amount of contrast that we've got going on between this darker, slightly shaded triangular areas and the rest of the edges as well. And again, I'm always working in flow of the direction of the hair, whether I'm going up or down, just so that we're really just selling these different shapes and making stuff just start to pop. This is nothing too crazy that we're doing, but adding in these simple little bits to your own character designs in their hair is really just going to help sell it that little bit more. So let's just go down here. I'm not going everywhere, not going too hard, not going crazy, but let's just bring an edge here, down in there as well, right down in here. And I'm only doing this at the lowest parts because if I go to the middle, I'm already working with the exact same color tone, so it's not going to make too much difference. And maybe just the odd bit as we come down with the shadow areas down here, and same just to catch these bits down here. Okay, lovely. So we've got our kind of darker zones in, we've given it a little bit of pop using some edge. Now there is another thing that you can do with these darker areas if you're so inclined. And again, I won't go too deep into this because I do want to keep it simple for you, but you can, when you're working with blonde characters, just aim for a little bit more of that orange. Actually go over to that orange side that we've got over here. And then if I create a new layer once more, make sure that that's clipped of course, I could, using this soft brush at this low opacity, just put a little hint of that slightly orangey color right in the tips, only in the darkest parts. But what that does is just ever so slightly give this hair a little bit of color spectrum to it, working not just from blondes now. We've got some kind of slightly more richer golden tones just seeping in without making the hair overall be a proper full-on Goldilocks effect. Just a few little bits here and here, just where there's that good area of shadow to get away with, throwing in ever so slightly a bit of saturated orange. Less again is always going to be more when you're trying stuff like that. Just a little there as well. So the last bit that I like to do with this is really just get that light bar of reflection going across the hair, and then you guys are essentially done. So new layer again. Once more, we're going to make sure that we've got things clipped. And what I like to do is always work in a big, quick, smooth arc again, guys, right across the lightest part of the hair up here. And what I'm going to be doing is grabbing the lasso selection tool, which basically draws a selection area like so. And I'm just going to sweep across in a curving, ever so slightly triangular sort of shape. I'm imagining being thicker here and just sweeping into a point somewhere off here. So let's just try something like this. And that's kind of okay, but I'm probably going to make that a little bit thinner. So let's give this, careful, one more try. Something like that, something like that. Now I'm happier. And then what you can always do is use this move tool here and actually just take that selection area and just kind of slide it up and down or back and forth, depending on where you want it with your character. I'm relatively happy for this one to just sit about there. And then what you do is you actually are just going to fill that with white. Just like so with the paint bucket tool. Again, it's only showing over the hair area. And then what we do is actually just start to cut this out. So I'm going to grab my eraser tool. I'm going to make sure it's selected as the hard brush. And what I'm going to do is zoom in ever so slightly, just like so. And firstly, I'm going to cut this out of all the areas where we've already applied this darker shadow tone, so that you can actually see exactly what you're up to. You can lower the opacity of that white layer. Let's go down to about 76, just so I can see through a little bit, and just start to erase with a very hard eraser line all of those toned bits, just like so. Whenever I've got like a bit of hair that comes up like this, actually let's undo that a touch, that's a little bit too hefty. I'm going to just cut all the way up and in and separate those bars. Again, this is very near this particular clump of hair, so I'm going to stop short ever so slightly, get rid of it over here, right up here as we follow that shape, and then just follow this around. So let's delete it here. Let's erase as we come around here with this shape. Let's follow this line right up there, just like so. And then on this side, right inside of here, down there, and I think you get the picture. We're going to be working our way up and along as we go. So let's just get this. And again, as we do different hairstyles, dark hair, coloured hair, combination hairs, and really saturated hairs as well, there are a number of different ways to do your white highlight as well. So there's going to be plenty to explore with that. Let's just try that curve again. That's better. And same thing around here. But this is, personally, I find the most graphically simple. It's got the most punch, and it takes relatively little effort compared to the different methods you can employ. So now that I've got that sorted, I'm just going to put in a few downward spikes that don't cut this bar in half any further, but do cut a few more spikes and shapes into it. So I might just do a very quick gesture where I just throw and flick a few bits in here. Maybe we've got one in there and one in there. Basically, I'm making lots of letter M's and lots of letter N's out of the whole situation. So just put a few in here. Let's go down there. Let's go up here. And then always make sure that you're doing these flicks in the direction of the hair. Let's sweep up here with something and then down there. One more down there. I think I can just erase that all together a bit further in here. And then let's go up there, down there again, and then once at the back. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this so that we're back on full opacity. And I'm just going to ever so gently erase the top and erase the bottom, still with the eraser tool, but using a very soft eraser brush that's not crazy big, but a little bit larger so that we can get a fairly nice gradient to that erasure. And I'm going to do this at about 60% opacity, just so I'm going to do a number of strokes. And I've got this brush riding just over the top. I'm not going right over the line, but I'm working right next to it in a number of gestures and strokes, just to get that really soft edge along the top. And then let's do the same thing along the bottom, just like so. And again, the way that I do this is less is always more. So I use low opacity brushes with lots of strokes, just to build up the effect that I want instead of diving straight in. And now, because of that really soft edge, we've got this nice sheen effect to the hair. Then I'm going to bring the opacity back down a touch. I don't really want it to be pure white, but I think something about, let's see how we're going here. Yeah, about 75 to 80%, something like that, is having the desired effect. So if I come out a bit, I'm relatively happy with how that looks up there. I will just go in on a fresh layer once more, grab a hard brush so that I can actually just colour in the hairbands really quickly as well. Let's use our picker tool and match the blue of the edge of her eyes like so, and then get that sorted out really quickly. I'll make sure that that's clipped as well. Oh, and let's make sure that we've got a hard brush tool at 100% now. Much better. Let's get this in. Just like so. And just up here. And then what I'm going to do is actually select that entire thing and pop on a darker tone as well. So I'm just going to hit that with the magic wand tool. So I've got that selected. I'm going to pluck the darker part of her eye tone from up here. And now using a very soft brush, which is relatively large and not too high of an opacity. Oh, just going to take the edge off this shape with a few light sweeping motions there and just that edge there. Excellent. So let's come out of that again. And basically, guys, there you have it. That is a very simple coloring method for light hair for your anime and manga characters. Really, we've just blocked it out. We've put on a little bit of very light darker tones and very light highlights. Then we've gone in with a brush and actually just started to pluck out a few separate blocks of his hair and put this darker triangular edge to all of the points around the fringe. And then we've just gone in and given that edge some pop by putting in some lighter tone against that to up the contrast. And then at the end, a light bar on a separate layer, which is really just a strip of white that we start to cut into using the eraser tool, and then just lowering the opacity a little bit to see how we feel. I could, if I wanted to really start going nuts, take this white and start plucking all sorts of bits down here, but really we can get dived into some really extreme stuff when we do a slightly more advanced version of this. For now, if you like to keep things simple, this is the way that I like to do it. So there we go guys, we've got our OC character Victoria on the top in her slightly younger and cuter form, now with her hair all coloured in. One last thing that I always want to have a little play around with guys, and I always recommend, it's a little bit of fun, is what you can do is grab your hair layers here. So I'm just going to take every layer that I've got, the top and the bottom of all the hair ones, and then holding the shift button I select them all, and I'm going to actually go ahead and duplicate these layers. I'm going to turn off all of the originals just so that I'm only looking at one copy, and I like to duplicate before I do anything just so I've always got the originals as backup, and I'm going to go ahead and merge those layers as well. So now everything involving the hair is on here or it's not. I will just make sure that the actual hair tie is still clipped down so that it's got nice sharp edges. And with this hair layer now selected, the fun of Photoshop is we can go over to image and we can go to adjustments. Let's have a look at hue saturation. And if you wanted to, we could start to go up and down this slider, really just give her that more of a farmyard rosy gold haircut. We can go all the way through towards light reds and so on. And basically you can just start playing around and doing as much crazy stuff as you want, because our white highlights are always going to stay over that whiter edge, and everything else is kind of going to conform to whatever color we change it to. To be fair, those greens were disgusting, but that kind of blue does have a certain pop. But I think really my heart is probably best found if we make her a bit of a redhead. Nice. But that's kind of going to be a different character altogether. So I'm going to put that back to 0. And also guys, we can start to up the saturation, just really make that pop. Drop it a little bit lower and really just start to grey that out depending on what's going on. There's loads of options to play with, but as long as you've used at least one method to get the hair in, and you put it all on one layer together, you can use those sliders to start having a lot of fun. So thanks a lot for watching guys. I really do hope you found today's fairly basic tutorial for colouring in the hair of your own manga and anime characters to be of some use. If you haven't already, make sure that you've clicked that subscribe button on the channel so that I can see you again in the future for more tutorials and bits further down the line. And as you've probably noticed on screen, we've got the names of some rather lovely people scrolling right now. And that's because what I like to do is basically make sure that you've all got access to everything that I know by making free tutorials on YouTube. But the only reason I'm actually able to do that is because a load of you lovely lot support me on Patreon, where of course you get stuff in return, including the tutorial work packs. So an extra large shout out to Mecha Shogun, Ryder2KX, Michael P, Carlos R, Breton F, Simbi Sai K, Fabio, Andrew E, Homongchi L, Zenith6, Jamie, Zahaki, and Matthew A. Thank you so much guys for all of the support. I hope to see you next time around, and take care.